Who let the maid in here? Evelyn Whitmore's venomous sneer cuts through the glittering gala at the Pinnacle, Manhattan. Maya Johnson, a stunning black woman with sleek, straight hair, in a white form-fitting dress, deep V-neck, tied sleeves, ruffled hem above the knee, arrives as a special guest. Yet the valet directs her to the service entrance. Guard Greg scrutinizes her invitation, forcing her to wait 45 minutes in the freezing snow. White guests glide past unchecked. Inside, Evelyn mocks Maya publicly. Charlotte, posing for Instagram, scoffs. She thinks this is charity. She accidentally spills wine on Maya's dress, sparking cruel laughter. Sarah, a young server, offers a napkin with a sympathetic glance. Will Maya endure this humiliation or unleash a devastating response? Subscribe now, share when and where you're watching, and rate this story 1 for gripping, 0 for not. What's your prediction? Can prejudice cost billions? The Pinnacle's grand entrance loomed like a cathedral of wealth, its marble columns gleaming under a canopy of golden light. Snowflakes drifted down, dusting Manhattan's streets in a deceptive hush, as if the city held its breath for the gala within. Maya Johnson stepped from her sleek black car, her silhouette a vision of elegance against the winter night. Her long, straight hair flowed like polished obsidian, catching the glow of streetlights. The white dress, form-fitting, with a deep V-neck, long sleeves tied delicately at the wrists, and a ruffled hem grazing above her knees, clung to her curves, exuding a blend of sophistication and subtle allure. She was no stranger to power, but tonight she carried herself with the quiet grace of a woman who knew her worth, her heels clicking purposefully on the icy pavement. The valet, bundled in a wool coat, didn't meet her eyes. Service entrance is around back, he muttered, gesturing toward a shadowed alley. Maya paused, her breath visible in the frigid air. I'm here for the Whitmore Gala, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. The valet's gaze flicked over her, confusion warring with suspicion, as if her presence in such finery defied logic. He shrugged, pointing vaguely toward the main entrance, his expression screaming she didn't belong. At the velvet rope, Greg, the security guard, stood like a gatekeeper to an exclusive realm. His clipboard was his scepter, his scowl a shield. White guests, draped in furs and tailored suits, sailed past with barely a glance at their embossed invitations. A woman in a mink coat flashed a smile, her card barely visible, and Greg waved her through with a nod. A loud businessman, phone glued to his ear, waved something that might have been an invitation, and Greg practically bowed. But when Maya presented her invitation, cream cardstock, gold embossed, identical to the others, Greg's demeanor shifted. His smile vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped frown. He held the card like it was contaminated, squinting at it under the dim light. No Johnson on the list, he declared, loud enough for a passing couple to smirk. Maya's jaw tightened, but her voice remained even. Please check again. I'm expected. Greg made a show of scanning his list, his finger tracing names with exaggerated slowness. Nope, nothing, he said, shaking his head with theatrical finality. The couple behind her, a Mr. and Mrs. Albrecht, rustled their invitation. Greg glanced at it for a split second, then beamed. Go right in. Have a wonderful evening, he chirped, ushering them past. Maya's stomach clenched. I have the invitation right here, she said, pointing to the card in Greg's hand. He shook his head, condescension dripping. Anyone can fake these nowadays. Kinko's prints them cheap. As he spoke, a young man in a rumpled tuxedo waved a flimsy printout and waltzed through without a second look. Greg's eyes narrowed at Maya. I'll need ID, he demanded, palm outstretched. She produced her driver's license, pristine and professional, but Greg treated it like a forged passport. He angled it under the light, scrutinized the photo 5 times, and even ran his thumb over the surface. This doesn't look right, he said, his voice carrying to the growing line of guests. The picture doesn't match. It matched perfectly, a clear shot taken months ago, but Greg wasn't looking for truth. He was searching for a reason to keep her out. It's legitimate, Maya said, her patience fraying like a taut wire. Greg sighed, stepping away with her ID and invitation. Gotta verify with management, he said, leaving her to stand in the biting cold. Snowflakes clung to her hair, melting into her dress's delicate fabric. For 45 minutes, she waited, her breath clouding the air, as hundreds of guests streamed past. Business moguls she recognized from fortune covers, socialites whose charities her foundation quietly funded. None were asked for ID, none were told to wait. Greg returned every 15 minutes with a fake smile. "Still checking, ma'am," he said, his tone dripping with insincere sympathy. Through the glass doors, Maya saw him laughing with the coat check girl, ignoring his radio. He wasn't verifying anything, just wielding his small power to make her feel small. A woman in a sequined gown pulled her husband away from Maya as if her presence were a stain. Another guest whispered, "Some people just don't get the hint." Maya's fingers tightened around her clutch, her poise unshaken but her eyes burning with a quiet fire. Inside, the gala pulsed with anticipation. The Whitmores, Edward, Evelyn, Charlotte, and Oliver, were kings of this gilded world, their $7 billion merger with Horizon Innovations the night's crowning jewel. Phones flashed, capturing every moment for Instagram's endless scroll. No one knew the woman shivering outside held their fate in her hands. Maya straightened her shoulders, brushing snow from her dress. She was no intruder. She was a titan, and the night was about to shift. The heavy glass doors of the pinnacle parted, and Maya Johnson stepped into the ballroom's golden glow, her heels echoing on polished marble. Her sleek, straight hair shimmered like a dark river, framing her poised frame. The white dress, form-fitting, with a deep V-neck, long sleeves tied at the wrists, and a ruffled hem above her knees, hugged her curves, a beacon of elegance amidst the glittering throng. But the air inside felt colder than the snow she'd left behind, thick with the weight of 100 judging eyes. "Who let the maid in here?" Evelyn Whitmore's venomous sneer cut through the gala's refined chatter. The matriarch, dripping in diamonds, stood at the room's heart, her silver hair sculpted into a regal crown. She pointed at Maya, a stunning black woman in a white dress, saying weighty yet alluring, and her words sparked a ripple of smirks. Charlotte, her daughter, paused mid-pose for an Instagram story, her lips curling. "She's so out of place, probably thinks this is a real charity event." In a rehearsed accident, Charlotte's wrist flicked, sending a cascade of white wine splashing across Maya's dress. The liquid bloomed like a wound, staining the pristine fabric as the crowd's laughter erupted, a cruel symphony. Not one soul suspected Maya held the key to a $7 billion deal that could save the Whitmores from ruin, or that she was about to make them pay dearly. Subscribe now, share when and where you're watching, and rate this story. 1 for gripping, 0 for not. Will Maya crumble under their scorn, or turn their world to ash? What's your guess? The room pulsed with wealth, chandeliers casting prisms, champagne flutes clinking, phones flashing like vultures circling prey. Maya stood frozen, the wine seeping into her dress, its chill biting her skin. Her heart pounded, but her face remained a mask of composure. Evelyn strode closer, her heels clicking like a predator's claws. "Sweetheart," she purred, her voice a blade wrapped in silk, "you're nothing here. This isn't your world." The crowd leaned in, some recording, others whispering barbs. "Look at her, acting all dignified," a woman in emerald scoffed. "The nerve," a man in a tux muttered, shaking his head. Sarah, a young server with kind eyes, slipped through the throng, pressing a napkin into Maya's hand. "You don't deserve this," she whispered, her glance warm but fleeting. Evelyn's gaze snapped to Sarah. "Don't waste our linens on her," she barked, and the crowd chuckled, their phones capturing every second. Sarah retreated, cheeks flushed, but her small act of defiance lingered in Maya's mind like a spark in the dark. Oliver Whitmore, swaying from too many whiskeys, raised his glass in a mock toast. "Hey, did someone call for cleaning service?" He slurred, his posse roaring. His tailored suit hung loose, a testament to a life squandered on privilege. Charlotte, her beauty cold as the diamonds at her throat, giggled musically. "She's probably looking for the broom closet." The laughter swelled, a tidal wave of disdain. Phones lit up, live tweeting the spectacle, hashtags like "Sure Your Pinnacle Fiasco" already trending. Maya's fingers tightened around the napkin, her eyes sweeping the room, locking onto each smirking face. Something shifted in her gaze, not anger, Not defeat, but a quiet, lethal resolve. Edward Whitmore, the patriarch, was holding court across the room, regaling investors with tales of his empire. His voice faltered as Evelyn's outburst drew his attention. "What's this nonsense?" he boomed, striding over, his face flushed with authority. "This is a private event, not a job fair." The crowd parted, their murmurs a chorus of agreement. Maya opened her mouth to speak, to clarify the grotesque misunderstanding, but Evelyn cut her off. "You don't belong here," she hissed, her smile venomous. "You're a stain on our evening." Maya's dress, now marred with wine, clung to her like a second skin, its elegance undimmed by the insult. She stood taller, her presence commanding despite the jeers. "I'm a guest," she said, her voice steady, slicing through the noise. But the crowd's laughter drowned her words, their phones relentless. A man in a pinstripe suit sneered, "She's trying so hard to fit in." Another guest, a socialite with a pearl clutch, added, "Someone call security. This is embarrassing." Sarah hovered at the edge, her tray trembling. She caught Maya's eye again, offering a nod so subtle it was nearly invisible. It was enough, a thread of humanity in a sea of cruelty. Maya's hand brushed her clutch where her phone rested. The room thought they were witnessing a nobody's downfall, but they were wrong. Maya wasn't breaking. She was gathering strength, her silence more dangerous than any scream. The Whitmores, oblivious, toasted their own arrogance, unaware that their $7 billion lifeline was slipping through their fingers. The air crackled with an unspoken promise. This night would cost them everything. Maya Johnson stood like a statue carved from defiance, the wine-stained hem of her white dress, form-fitting, deep V-neck, long sleeves tied at the wrists, ruffled above her knees, dripping onto the marble floor. Her sleek, straight hair framed a face that held no tears, only a smoldering resolve. The gala's cruel laughter still echoed, but her mind drifted, pulling her back to a place far from the pinnacle's gilded cage. Brooklyn's cracked sidewalks, where the air smelled of asphalt and dreams, flickered into focus. 25 years ago, a younger Maya, barely 16, stood in a cramped apartment, her mother's calloused hands gripping her shoulders. That memory, sharp as a blade, was the root of her strength, a strength the Whitmores, blind to her truth, would soon come to fear. The apartment was a shoebox, its walls papered with faded hope. Laundry hung like flags of surrender, and a single bulb cast shadows over a table scarred by time. Maya's mother, Clara, stood in a worn apron, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion etched into her face. She'd come home from scrubbing floors in Manhattan high-rises, her knees bruised, her spirit unbroken. "They laughed at me today, Maya," Clara said, her voice low but steady. "Called me the help behind my back. But you?" She cupped Maya's face, her fingers rough but warm. "You're stronger than their words. Turn their scorn into fuel." Maya, her teenage braids tight against her scalp, nodded, her chest tight with a promise she'd carry forever. That promise drove her through nights of studying by candlelight when the power was cut, through sneers at her scholarship-funded college, where classmates whispered she didn't belong. "You're just a quota," a professor had sneered once, tossing her paper aside. Maya aced his class, then built an empire from a single idea scratched on a napkin in a Brooklyn diner. Horizon Innovations, now worth $75 billion, was her monument, a titan in artificial intelligence and sustainable energy, born from grit in Clara's unwavering belief. She'd turned down Forbes covers, shunned red carpets, kept her face out of the spotlight. Few knew the woman in the wine-soaked dress was the CEO who held the keys to a $7 billion merger that could save the Whitmores' crumbling dynasty. Back in the ballroom, the air buzzed with oblivious arrogance. Edward Whitmore, his face ruddy from champagne, boasted to investors about the merger, unaware that the woman he'd dismissed as an intruder was its linchpin. Evelyn, her diamonds glinting like shards of ice, flitted among guests, her laughter a weapon. Charlotte, scrolling through her phone, posted a selfie with the caption, "Gala vibes minus the riffraff." Oliver slouched against a bar, slurred jokes to his sycophants, their phones still recording Maya's humiliation. The crowd's chatter was a venomous hum, each word a needle in Maya's skin. Yet she stood, her poise unshaken, her eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up prey. Clara's voice echoed in her mind. You're stronger than their words. Maya's fingers brushed her clutch, where her phone waited like a loaded gun. She'd come to this gala expecting a night of mutual respect, a toast to a partnership that would reshape industries. Instead, she'd found a cesspool of prejudice, a room that saw her sleek hair and elegant dress as a costume hiding a nobody. The irony was bitter. She owned half the skyscrapers these people worked in, funded their charities, held their debts in her banks. The Whitmores, teetering on bankruptcy, didn't know their lifeline stood before them, stained and scorned. The memory of Clara's hands steadied her. Maya had built Horizon from nothing, hiring thousands, revolutionizing tech, all while honoring her mother's sacrifice. Every deal she signed, every tower she bought, was a tribute to the woman who scrubbed floors so Maya could soar. Now, as the crowd's laughter faded into a mocking hum, Maya felt Clara's fire ignite within her. She wasn't here to beg for respect. She was here to demand it. A guest in a velvet blazer leaned toward his companion, whispering, "She's still standing there, like she owns the place." The irony burned. Maya owned the place. Through a shell corporation, the pinnacle was hers, a detail the Whitmores would learn too late. The $7 billion merger, set to be announced tonight, was their last hope to save Whitmore Enterprises from collapse. Edward's bad investments, Evelyn's obsession with status, Charlotte and Oliver's reckless privilege, they'd hollowed out their legacy, leaving only a facade of wealth. Maya's signature was the only thing standing between them and ruin. Her eyes locked on Sarah, the young server hovering near a pillar, her tray steady despite the chaos. Sarah's earlier kindness, the napkin pressed into Maya's hand, was a lifeline in this sea of malice. Maya nodded slightly, a silent thank you, and Sarah's lips curved in a faint, defiant smile. The room didn't notice, too drunk on its own cruelty. But Maya saw everything, their faces, their phones, their ignorance. She wasn't broken. She was a storm-gathering strength, and the Whitmores were about to learn the cost of their scorn. Maya Johnson stood at the edge of the ballroom, her wine-stained dress, form-fitting, deep V-neck, long sleeves tied at the wrists, ruffled hem above her knees, clinging to her like a battle-worn banner. Her sleek, straight hair framed a face etched with quiet defiance, her eyes burning through the crowd's fading laughter. The pinnacle's chandeliers cast prisms across faces drunk on privilege, oblivious to the storm brewing in her silence. The Whitmore family, draped in their illusion of invincibility, held court, unaware that their empire teetered on a knife's edge. Maya's presence, a specter of power they couldn't see, loomed larger with every heartbeat. The $7 billion merger with Horizon Innovations, their last gasp of salvation, was a secret only she understood, a secret that would soon unravel their world. Edward Whitmore, his silver hair slicked back, gripped a champagne flute, his knuckles white beneath the bravado. To a cluster of investors, he spun tales of Whitmore Enterprises' glory, steel and skyscrapers that once defined New York's skyline. "Our legacy is ironclad," he boasted, his voice booming over the clink of glasses. But his eyes darted, betraying the truth. Decades of reckless investments, failed tech ventures, over-leveraged properties, had gutted the company. Debts piled like dry tinder, and creditors circled like wolves. The merger, set to be announced tonight, was his miracle, a $7 billion infusion to erase his sins. He didn't know the woman he'd dismissed as an intruder held the pen to sign it, or to burn it to ash. Evelyn Whitmore glided through the crowd, her emerald gown trailing like a royal train. Her smile was a practiced weapon, honed on charity boards and gala stages. Status was her oxygen. The thought of losing her perch among Manhattan's elite was a terror worse than bankruptcy. "We're the heartbeat of this city," she purred to a socialite, her diamonds catching the light like stars. But her charity events were less about compassion and more about control, a theater where she played queen, casting out those she deemed unworthy. Maya, standing silently, was her latest target, a blemish to be erased. Evelyn's laughter rang out, sharp and performative, as she recounted her made quip to a fawning guest. unaware her throne was built on sand. Charlotte Whitmore, 27 and radiant, leaned against a marble pillar, her phone glowing with Instagram notifications. Her beauty was a mask for a heart schooled in cruelty, learned at her mother's knee. Yet as she scrolled through comments praising her gala selfie, a flicker of unease crossed her face. Mocking Maya had felt automatic, a reflex to please Evelyn. But the woman's unyielding poise unnerved her. "She's still here," Charlotte muttered to a friend, glancing at Maya's stained dress. Evelyn's sharp glance caught her hesitation. "Don't go soft, darling," she hissed. "We don't coddle strays." Charlotte's lips tightened, and she posted another photo, captioned, "Keeping it classy." The likes poured in, but her fingers trembled, a crack in her polished facade. She didn't know Maya's gaze held a reckoning. Oliver Whitmore, 30 and disheveled, slumped at the bar, his tuxedo rumpled from too many drinks. His life was a string of failed ventures, nightclubs, crypto scams, funded by his father's dwindling fortune. "Another round," he slurred, his sycophants cheering. His cruelty was a crutch, propping up a fragile ego. His earlier toast mocking Maya had earned laughs, but now he felt the room's energy shift. "What's her deal?" he muttered, eyeing Maya's unwavering stance. His phone buzzed with Twitter replies to his VIP-made post, each like a hit of validation. Yet a nagging unease gnawed at him, as if he'd kicked a hornet's nest. He shrugged it off, ordering another whiskey, blind to the cliff he was dancing on. Maya watched them all, her silence a gathering storm. Her dress, marred but majestic, seemed to mock the room's shallow splendor. The crowd's whispers, "She's got some nerve staying," only fueled her resolve. Sarah, the young server, moved through the throng, her tray steady, her eyes flicking to Maya with quiet admiration. Their earlier exchange, a napkin and a whisper, had forged a silent bond. Maya's fingers grazed her clutch, where her phone waited like a guillotine. She'd come to celebrate a partnership, not to be a punching bag. The Whitmore's empire, hollowed by greed and arrogance, depended on her. They saw a nobody. She was their everything. The gala's pulse quickened, phones flashing like fireflies, capturing every smirk for the digital void. The Whitmores, wrapped in their delusion, toasted their imminent triumph. Edward raised a glass, proclaiming, "To new horizons." The irony was a blade only Maya felt. She owned their banks, their buildings, their future. The $7 billion deal was her gift, and her weapon. As the crowd cheered, oblivious, her eyes locked on Sarah, who offered a faint nod. The room thought they were kings, but Maya was the chess master, and their checkmate was coming. Maya Johnson stood resolute, a solitary flame in the ballroom's gilded haze. Her wine-stained dress, form-fitting, deep V-neck, long sleeves tied at the wrists, ruffled hem above her knees, clung to her like armor, the damp fabric a badge of endured scorn. Her sleek, straight hair, framed eyes that burned with a quiet fury, no longer veiled by patience. The pinnacle's chandeliers cast mocking shadows, but the crowd's laughter had sharpened into a blade, slicing deeper with each jeer. The Whitmores, drunk on their own arrogance, pushed their cruelty to its zenith, oblivious to the $7 billion merger slipping through their fingers. Maya's silence wasn't surrender. It was the calm before a reckoning, and the room would soon feel its weight. Oliver Whitmore, his tuxedo creased from excess, staggered forward, phone raised like a weapon. "Smile for the camera, VIP maid," he slurred, his voice a drunken taunt. His thumb hit record, capturing Maya's stained dress for a Twitter post that screamed, "When the help thinks they're high society." The crowd roared, their phones joining the fray, a digital coliseum thirsting for blood. Hashtags, a pinnacle fiasco, on out of place, lit up screens, each retweet a lash against Maya's dignity. Oliver's posse clinked glasses, their laughter a cacophony of privilege. "This is going viral," he crowed, oblivious to the noose he was tying around his family's legacy. Evelyn Whitmore, her emerald gown shimmering, seized the moment to cement her dominance. She glided toward the bar, where Maya had stepped to request a glass of water, her throat parched from the ordeal. The bartender hesitated, his eyes flicking to Evelyn. "No drinks for the help," she declared, her voice loud enough to halt nearby conversations. She doesn't deserve a drop from our glasses. The crowd's chuckles swelled, a chorus of complicity. Evelyn's smile was a slash of triumph, her diamonds glinting like knives. "This is our night," she said to a nearby socialite. "No one ruins it, not her." Charlotte Whitmore, poised near a marble column, adjusted her sequined dress, her phone still buzzing with Instagram likes. Her earlier hesitation had faded under Evelyn's glare, replaced by a practiced cruelty. Spotting Maya near a velvet chair, she saw her chance. "Oh, are you lost?" Charlotte called, her voice dripping with mock concern. As Maya moved to sit, her feet aching from standing, Charlotte yanked the chair back with a delicate flick. Maya stumbled, catching herself on the table's edge, her dress pulling tight against her frame. The crowd erupted, their phones flashing like paparazzi at a scandal. "She's better off standing," Charlotte quipped, her laugh musical but hollow. "Chairs are for guests." Sarah, the young server, weaved through the throng, her tray trembling with champagne flutes. Her eyes met Maya's, a silent apology in their depths. "You don't deserve this," she whispered, so low only Maya could hear, her voice a lifeline in the storm. Sarah's courage was a flicker of light, but the crowd's cruelty drowned it out. A man in a pinstripe suit leaned toward his companion, smirking. "She's got some nerve, acting like she belongs." Another guest, a woman with a pearl clutch, added, "This is just sad. Security's failing us." Their words, sharp as glass, cut through the air, each one a testament to their blindness. Maya's fingers tightened around her clutch, her phone a dormant volcano ready to erupt. The room saw a nobody, a woman to be mocked, but she was a titan cloaked in elegance. The Whitmore's empire, a house of cards built on debt and delusion, rested on her signature, a $7 billion deal to save their name. She'd come to celebrate a partnership, not to be their sport. Now their cruelty had lit a fuse. Her eyes swept the room, cataloging every face. Evelyn's smug grin, Charlotte's performative giggle, Oliver's drunken swagger. They thought they were untouchable, their phones immortalizing their triumph. They were wrong. Mr. Peterson, a hedge fund manager, stood at the edge, his voice low but cutting. "She's tougher than she looks, but she's out of her league," he muttered, unaware his own firm relied on Horizon's investments. The irony was a silent scream only Maya heard. She owned their banks, their buildings, their futures. The pinnacle itself was hers, a fact buried in shell corporations. The crowd's phones, their weapon of choice, would soon turn against them, their tweets and stories a digital guillotine. Sarah lingered nearby, her tray a shield, her gaze steady on Maya. Their silent bond, forged in a moment of kindness, pulsed like a heartbeat. Maya's lips curved, not in defeat but in determination. She wasn't here to break. She was here to build, or destroy. The Whitmores, basking in their fleeting victory, raised glasses to their empire's new dawn. The merger's announcement loomed, their salvation at hand. But Maya's hand hovered over her phone, her resolve a blade honed by their scorn. The room pulsed with ignorant glee, but the air crackled with her unspoken vow. They would pay, and the cost would be everything. Maya Johnson stood like a queen in a battlefield of scorn, her wine-stained dress, form-fitting, deep V-neck, long sleeves tied at the wrists, ruffled hem above her knees. A testament to her unbowed spirit. Her sleek, straight hair framed a face carved from resolve, her eyes a storm ready to break. The Pinnacle's ballroom pulsed with the crowd's ignorant glee, their phones flashing like vultures circling a dying beast. The Whitmores, basking in their cruelty, were blind to the $7 billion merger slipping from their grasp. Maya's silence had been a gathering thunder, and now, with a single move, she would unleash its roar. Her hand closed around her phone, a weapon primed to shatter their world. The air crackled as Maya raised the device, her fingers moving with deliberate grace. The crowd's laughter faltered, a few heads turning at the shift in her presence. She tapped the screen, and a clear chime cut through the din, sharp as a guillotine's fall. "Horizon Innovations, Maya Johnson speaking," she said, her voice low but resonant, carrying a weight that silenced nearby whispers. On the other end, her chief legal counsel, David Chen, spoke with crisp professionalism. "Ms. Johnson, the Whitmore merger contracts are finalized. Ready for your digital signature tonight? Oliver Whitmore, still swaying from whiskey, replayed his viral video to his cackling posse, oblivious to the seismic shift unfolding. "This is gold," he slurred, scrolling through retweets. Evelyn, her emerald gown shimmering, regaled a cluster of socialites with an embellished tale of her maid quip, her laughter a brittle mask. Charlotte, checking her Instagram likes, glanced at Maya, a flicker of unease in her eyes. The crowd's phones buzzed, hashtags like Just Sure Pinnacle Fiasco trending higher, but a few guests caught the words merger and horizon, their murmurs turning curious. Maya's voice dropped to a chilling whisper, each word a hammer strike. "Cancel everything, David. Every contract, every partnership." A stunned pause crackled through the line. "Ms. Johnson, the entire $7 billion deal?" David asked, his tone professional, but tinged with shock. Maya's gaze swept the room, locking onto Evelyn's smug grin, Oliver's drunken swagger, Charlotte's faltering poise. "Burn it all down," she said, her voice steel wrapped in velvet. "Transfer the $7 billion to the Rebirth Fund, support for Black women and minority entrepreneurs. Send confirmation immediately." Edward Whitmore, mid-toast with investors, froze as the words $7 billion drifted across the room like a phantom alarm. His champagne flute trembled, his ruddy face paling. "What did she say?" he muttered, pushing through the crowd, his heart hammering. Evelyn, still oblivious, scoffed to her entourage. "She's probably calling her parole officer," she sneered, sparking fresh laughter. But the chuckles were strained now, a seed of doubt taking root. Charlotte lowered her phone, her fingers hovering over a new post, her earlier hesitation resurfacing. "Something's off," she whispered to a friend, but Evelyn's glare silenced her. Sarah, the young server, lingered near a pillar, her tray steady, her eyes fixed on Maya with quiet awe. Their shared glance from earlier, a thread of humanity, pulsed stronger now. Sarah's faint nod was a silent cheer, a recognition of the power Maya wielded. The crowd, still caught in their digital revelry, didn't notice the shift, but a few guests, those closest to Maya, stopped recording. Words like billion and horizon pierced their arrogance, their faces paling as they sensed a storm. Edward reached Maya, his voice cracking with desperation. "Excuse me, what's your name?" he stammered, his earlier bravado gone. Maya ended her call with a decisive tap, her eyes cold as winter. "You'll know soon enough," she said, her tone a blade slicing through his panic. His investors, sensing trouble, exchanged uneasy glances. "Edward, is everything all right?" one asked, but he ignored them, his gaze locked on Maya's unyielding face. The room's energy shifted, the laughter dying like a snuffed flame. Phones still flashed, but now with uncertainty, as if capturing the prelude to a catastrophe. Evelyn, sensing the change, stormed over, her diamonds flashing like warning lights. "What's this nonsense?" she snapped, her voice shrill. "She's nobody, Edward." But her words faltered as Maya's presence loomed larger, a force no longer invisible. The crowd's murmurs grew, a mix of confusion and dread. Mr. Peterson, the hedge fund manager, whispered to his partner, "Did she say Horizon? That's our biggest client." His phone buzzed with urgent texts, his face ashen. The digital coliseum they'd built to mock Maya was turning, its blades now aimed at them. Maya's fingers rested on her clutch, her poise unshaken. The Whitmores had mistaken her silence for weakness, her elegance for pretense. They didn't know she owned the pinnacle, their banks, their future. The $7 billion deal, their lifeline, was now a weapon in her hands. Sarah watched, her heart racing, as Maya stood like a beacon in the chaos. The room, still buzzing with ignorant chatter, was a house of cards about to fall. Maya's next move would light the match, and the Whitmores would burn. Maya Johnson stood like a monument to resilience. Her wine-stained dress, form-fitting, deep V-neck, long sleeves tied at the wrists, ruffled hem above her knees, clinging to her as a symbol of endured scorn. Her sleek, straight hair framed a face alight with unshakable authority, her eyes piercing the pinnacle's gilded air. The ballroom's chatter had dissolved into a tomb-like silence, the crowd's phones faltering as Maya's cryptic words, "You'll know soon enough," hung like a guillotine's blade. Edward Whitmore's panicked question echoed unanswered, his face drained of color. The $7 billion merger, their lifeline, was gone. And now the woman they'd mocked was about to unveil a truth that would shatter their world. The air crackled with dread, a prelude to their ruin. Maya reached into her clutch, her movements deliberate, as if handling a sacred relic. She withdrew a single business card, black anodized metal, her name and title etched in platinum, a token worth more than the crowd's collective egos. Maya Johnson, CEO of Horizon Innovations, she said, her voice a calm, devastating thunder. She handed the card to Edward, whose trembling fingers fumbled, dropping his champagne flute. The glass shattered on the marble floor, a gunshot in the silence, splintering the room's fragile arrogance. Every head turned, eyes wide, as the truth detonated. Evelyn, her emerald gown no longer regal, snatched the card from Edward's hand. "This is impossible!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're nobody, a fraud!" Maya's gaze swept the room, locking onto each face. Evelyn's hysteria, Charlotte's frozen shock, Oliver's drunken stupor. "I own this building," she said, her words slicing through the stillness. "The pinnacle is mine. Bought 3 years ago through a shell corporation. I own the banks holding your debts, the funds managing your trust accounts." She paused, letting the weight crush them. "The $7 billion merger you pinned your hopes on? That was mine to give, or take." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath, as phones lowered, their screens dark with dawning horror. Evelyn's face contorted, her diamonds dull against her pallor. "No!" she screamed, her voice a desperate wail. "You can't be her! Not someone like you!" The phrase hung, a damning echo of her bigotry, as her hands shook, the metal card slipping to the floor. Edward staggered, clutching a table for support. "You're Horizon's Washington?" he stammered, misnaming her in his panic, his empire crumbling in his mind. The investors behind him exchanged frantic whispers, their faces ashen. "She's our biggest client," one muttered, fumbling with his phone, desperate to salvage ties. Charlotte, her sequined dress catching the light, stood petrified, her phone forgotten in her hand. Her Instagram posts, once a badge of pride, now felt like a noose. The hashtags and Pinnacle fiasco were turning against her, retweets morphing into accusations. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her earlier cruelty was a weight she couldn't shed. Oliver, swaying, lowered his phone, his viral video no longer a triumph, but a suicide note. "This can't be real," he slurred, his voice hollow, as the crowd's eyes burned into him. Sarah, the young server, stood near a pillar, her tray steady, her eyes gleaming with quiet pride. Maya's glance met hers, a silent acknowledgement of their bond forged in kindness. Sarah's faint smile was a beacon, a reminder that humanity endured even here. The crowd, once a unified front of scorn, fractured. Guests who'd laughed loudest now slipped toward exits, their phones clutched tightly, frantically deleting videos. Mr. Peterson, the hedge fund manager, texted his partners in a panic, his firm's reliance on Horizon's funds a sudden noose. "We're done," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Maya's voice rose, clear and unyielding. "You didn't need to know my title to treat me as human," she said, her words a verdict. "You chose cruelty, not because of who I am, but because of what you saw. My skin." She stepped forward, her stained dress a banner of triumph. "You mocked me, denied me water, and called me nothing. Now you know who I am, and you'll know the cost." The silence was absolute, the room a gallery of horrified faces. Evelyn collapsed into a chair, her composure shattered. Edward's knees buckled, his legacy dust. Charlotte's eyes glistened, her world unraveling. Oliver stared at his phone as if it could undo his fate. The pinnacle, Maya's unseen kingdom, stood as a silent witness. The $7 billion deal, their salvation, was ash, redirected to the rebirth fund for those they deemed unworthy. The crowd's phones, once weapons, were now liabilities, their posts a digital tombstone for their reputations. Sarah's nod to Maya was a quiet vow, a promise that this moment would ripple beyond these walls. The Whitmores, their empire exposed as a sham, faced a truth sharper than any blade. They hadn't just insulted a woman, they'd burned their future, and Maya was the fire. The Pinnacle's ballroom lay silent, its chandeliers dimmed like fading stars. Maya Johnson stood at its heart, her wine-stained dress, form-fitting, deep V-neck, long sleeves tied at the wrists, ruffled hem above her knees, a defiant emblem of her triumph. Her sleek, straight hair caught the last glimmers of light, framing a face radiant with purpose. The Whitmore's empire had crumbled in a single night, their $7 billion lifeline severed by her hand. As she stepped toward the exit, her heels echoed like a gavel's final strike. The crowd, once a chorus of scorn, stood frozen, their phones now burdens, their tweets a requiem for their own ruin. Maya's parting glance met Sarah's, a silent vow that this end was a beginning. The world beyond these walls would feel the ripples, and the Whitmores would learn what nothing truly meant. Within hours, New York's digital pulse carried the story like wildfire. Hashtags, Mosh Whitmore racism, Rasher billion-dollar bigotry, exploded across Twitter, each post a nail in the family's coffin. News outlets blazed with headlines. Billionaire CEO cancels $7 billion deal after racial humiliation. Whitmore Enterprises, a hollowed-out shell, declared bankruptcy by dawn. Creditors swooped, seizing assets, skyscrapers, yachts, the very pinnacle itself which Maya had quietly owned. Edward Whitmore, at 66, faced personal ruin. He took a job as a property manager in a gritty Queens suburb, his commute a 2-hour slog on the subway, his tailored suits replaced by a gray uniform. "We're finished," he whispered to his reflection, his once proud name a ghost. Evelyn Whitmore, stripped of her social crown, became a pariah. Charity boards she'd ruled now blocked her calls. At 62, she folded sweaters in a Fifth Avenue boutique, forcing smiles for women she'd once snubbed. Her diamonds, auctioned to fund a scholarship in Maya's name, were a bitter reminder of her fall. "How did this happen?" she muttered, her voice trembling as customers passed without a glance. Her world, built on exclusion, had cast her out. The gala's viral videos, once her stage, now branded her a relic of bigotry, her face plastered across every screen. Charlotte, 28, stood behind a coffee counter in Brooklyn, her hands chapped from steaming milk. Her Instagram, once a shrine to privilege, was a wasteland of hate comments. "You're that girl," a customer sneered, her viral selfie now a scarlet letter. "I didn't know," Charlotte whispered, but no one cared. Her beauty, once a weapon, was irrelevant. Her name, once a shield, was poison. Oliver, 30, scrubbed floors in a tech incubator downtown, a gleaming hub funded by Horizon Innovations. His VIP-made video haunted him, a meme of his own arrogance. "It was just a joke," he muttered, mopping under desks built with Maya's redirected billions. His nights in a cramped studio were a far cry from the penthouses he'd squandered. Maya's rebirth fund, seeded with $7 billion, became a beacon. It poured into businesses led by Black women, Latino innovators, and minority dreamers across New York. Workshops in Harlem and the Bronx buzzed with entrepreneurs, their ideas sparked by Maya's stand. Sarah, the server who'd offered a napkin and a whisper, stood among them. A rebirth scholarship funded her startup, a tech platform for underserved communities. "You gave me a chance," she told Maya at a workshop, her eyes bright with gratitude. Maya smiled, her dress from that night, clean but kept as a reminder, folded away like a relic of victory. "You gave me hope first," she replied, their bond a quiet testament to humanity's endurance. The media hailed Maya as a titan of justice. "Prejudice costs Whitmore's everything," Forbes declared, a bitter irony given her refusal to grace their cover. The Pinnacle was sold to a consortium of minority-owned firms, funded by the Rebirth Fund, its marble halls now a symbol of renewal. Social media, once a weapon against Maya, turned her story into a movement. Rebirth Rising trended, posts flooding with stories of those uplifted by her fund. "This is bigger than one night," a young founder tweeted, her startup born from Maya's vision. The city, once a stage for the Whitmores' arrogance, became a canvas for change. The Whitmores, scattered and broken, learned a truth sharper than loss. Edward, riding the subway, saw Maya's face on a newsstand, her poise unshaken. Evelyn, folding sweaters, heard customers whisper her disgrace. Charlotte, pouring coffee, flinched at every mention of her name. Oliver, mopping floors, saw his own face in a meme, a cautionary tale. They'd traded their legacy for a moment of cruelty, believing Maya's dignity was theirs to crush. They were wrong. Maya had shown them what nothing felt like, not just in wealth, but in respect, in humanity. As Maya walked Manhattan streets, her sleek hair catching the winter light, she carried Clara's fire. The Rebirth Fund wasn't just her victory. It was a legacy for those who'd been dismissed, mocked, erased. The Whitmores had lost everything, but Maya had built something eternal. Dignity is priceless, she said at a workshop, her voice echoing Clara's. The crowd, inspired, rose to applaud. The cost of prejudice was clear. It wasn't just billions. It was everything that mattered. The dust has settled, but Maya Johnson's stand echoes far beyond the Pinnacle's walls. Her fire, born from scorn, ignited a movement, proof that dignity outshines prejudice. What do you think? Would you have walked away or burned it all down like Maya? Share your thoughts below. Tell us when and where you're listening, and rate this story, 1 for unforgettable, 0 if it missed the mark. Your voice matters, and we want to hear it. Thank you for joining this journey, for standing with Maya, Sarah, in a world reborn from ashes. Your support fuels these stories, and we're grateful for every moment you've shared. Until next time, keep seeking truth, keep championing justice. We'll meet again soon with another tale to stir your soul.